It is Wednesday, August 26, 2026, coming to you from America's beautiful North Coast, from the shores of Lake Superior. This is the American Dissent. I'm your host, Sam Martin.
And I'm Jen Schultz.
Before we dive in, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button. Write a comment. It all helps as we begin our journey here on YouTube. If you're listening to a podcast, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you ever so much. On today's show, Trump claps back at Canada in the most Trump way possible, threatening to rename Lake Ontario Lake America. Nobody's impressed. Speaking of which, the world took a look at Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's threats, yawned, and went back about their business undaunted. Iran used language similar to that used by Ontario Premier Doug Ford, calling the U.S. a bully. Oman and Iran released a joint statement about how they will manage the Strait of Hormuz with no consideration for American interests. China has reiterated its intention to continue working with Iran, saying that it will take steps to ensure that continuation. Scholars warn that should Bessent elevate and actually carry through on his threats, Trump will not get his desired results, and that the threat of all-out war will just continue to ratchet up. The numbers are in for total ICE arrests in July, nearly 50,000. More than half of those arrests were of people with no criminal convictions or even pending charges. And more than half of those arrests were non-custodial, which means that ICE arrested them out in the community, not taking over custody of them from local police. This is a massive jump in ICE activity after what was a lull in ICE activity following the killings of Renee Good and Alex Pretty in Minnesota by masked ICE and CBP thugs. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has agreed to a settlement of up to $17.1 billion with 47 states, D.C., and U.S. territories, in addition to making a commitment to make product changes after they were accused of endangering children with addiction to its social media platforms. This follows a finding of liability earlier this year in a suit filed by 4 states in which the plaintiffs sought nearly 10 times that settlement amount in damages. Ultimately, $17.1 billion is a drop in the bucket for Meta, very much the cost of doing business. Turning to elections, Darlene Graham won her primary runoff to continue serving as U.S. Senator for South Carolina after being appointed to serve out her late brother's term. She was very heavily backed by Donald Trump, who even made a rare campaign appearance on her behalf, yet she only managed a narrow 5-point victory in the state. Next week, Massachusetts voters head to the polls for primaries there. Democrats have important competitive primaries in 4 federal elections, most of which could continue to change the political complexion of the party in Washington. Meanwhile, the general election in Michigan is in full swing. As expected, the race has quickly gotten ugly, with Republican Mike Rogers accusing his opponent, Abdul El-Sayed, of anti-Semitism and palling around with Hasan Piker. Rogers, meanwhile, has hired campaign staff who are actual out-and-out anti-Semites. But the media has largely focused on the former and not on the latter. Part of this is that Rogers has found himself some unlikely allies. Centrist Democrats more interested in disciplining El-Sayed than they are in winning the Senate seat. This includes both national Democrats and several in Michigan. These headlines and more up for discussion on today's Dissent. I was going crazy yesterday, Jen. I'm still going crazy about this stuff.
Let's start with Canada, since that's really on my mind, because I just read the data, at least for Minnesota, and heard about Michigan. But Canada is the largest trading partner for Minnesota, and I think Michigan, and probably other states. But We trade $5.5 billion just in Minnesota with Canadians. So these tariffs are really going to hurt these states. And it's just, hopefully someone will have some sense and they'll get walked back. But man, this and we just heard the egg commissioner in Minnesota talk about how this is going to hurt farmers in our state, which is probably true of Michigan. But Michigan, their trade is over $20 billion. So, I mean, this is so bad for our country. Man, they don't know what they're doing. They really don't.
Yeah, they seem not to care whether they know or not. I mean, this is all just, the emperor has on a whim decided he doesn't like Canada for right now, which, I mean, he's been deciding that for a while. He's not been a fan of Canada for a minute. But it's interesting. You pointed out yesterday that the Republican nominee for governor and current Speaker of the House, Lisa Demuth, she clapped back at Trump for these tariffs. Now, when you're hurting the money, then Republicans will protest. But
well, the reason she did is because, I think, sorry, I interrupted you, Sam, but I think it's because, she had to win the primary. So she had to be extreme to get endorsed and win the primary, I think. And now she's moderating. So she's running against sitting Senator Amy Klobuchar. So now she's probably not going to align with Trump as much because she's trying to get those independent voters.
Well, I have no doubt that that's true. But as you said, I mean, she complained when it's attacking the money. When Trump attacks the money, Republicans complain. When his thugs actually kill people in the streets in Minnesota, crickets, or outright cheering them on, as was the case for Peggy Flanagan's opponent, Michelle Tafoya, who's like absolutely bonkers, saying that ICE treats children well and all that stuff. I mean, obviously, I don't think either Amy or Peggy have much. I think the general elections in Minnesota are going to be fairly sleepy, at least at the statewide level. Down ballot, Keith Ellison always has a tighter race just because of the racial elements of
and fraud and fraud. So I think the state auditor race and the AG race were close last time. So those are the races to watch. But
well, can you be clear about what you mean by fraud? Keith Ellison has not committed fraud.
No, Republicans are running on fraud, and that's going to be their main message. And they're blaming Ellison. Right. That he's responsible. His opponent is blaming him for not doing more or being accountable, even though Ellison is pursuing it. But that's what they're going to run on. Right. And that could be an element in closer races in those two elections.
And this is not, I should say that this is the fraud, supposed huge amounts of fraud. I mean, there was some fraud and it was being investigated. In fact, it was the feds, you had mentioned this, the feds insisted that they were the ones that should handle it. And they took it away from Keith Ellison and Governor Tim Walz to deal with. They were trying to deal with it, and the Fed said, no, this is our jurisdiction. So it was being dealt with the U.S. attorney. This is the same fraud that was used as an excuse to implement Operation Metro Surge that led to the deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. So the Republicans can just go,
Yeah, and on ICE, the ICE agent that they're trying to extradite from Texas apparently now is going to be released from Texas jail.
Oh,
on Thursday.
That's the lawsuit.
Yep,
is trying to prevent that from happening. So tomorrow
the judge ruled on that today, I believe, and so that person will be released.
Oh God!
So I don't know what will happen after that.
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear that he has a paramour or something in Mexico where he intends to buy a house. So he's going to run away to Mexico, and he's going to be aided and abetted by the governor of Texas.
Possibly.
And apparently the sheriff, who's got this guy under custody, has been perfectly reasonable to work with, per Keith Ellison. I mean, that's been fine. Now the issue is the state of Texas. The issue is Governor Greg Abbott, who's trying to help this goon, this ICE goon, escape justice. Of course. I mean, Republicans are the law and order party until they're not, until they want to break the law. Then they're perfectly happy to look the other way and not have anything to do with law and order. Just look at Donald Trump and his whole family. There is no law. There is no order. It's just complete chaos and nonsense.
The former prison in Minnesota that Homeland Security ICE has purchased for a detention center, there was an ad on the radio this morning hiring people to operate that detention center. So people will start being sent there, I'm sure, soon.
Well, as I said in the headlines, I mean, almost 50,000 arrests, ICE arrests, just in July. I mean, remember, ICE is dealing with what are called civic infractions. These are not criminal cases. That ICE is like paper pushers. That's what they really should be. They've turned into this paramilitary goon squad that operates like brown shirts on behalf of Donald Trump. But their real mandate is to deal with what are misdemeanors, essentially.
Or people who are just in the process of getting a green card, like that sailor on the USS Lincoln whose father was arrested by ICE, and he was in the process of getting a green card. Working here, has a work permit. They arrested him, sent him to a detention center.
Yeah, they're trying to strip people of green cards, and they're even trying to denaturalize people who have been naturalized, which is literally stripping citizens of their citizenship. If you've gone through naturalization, you're a citizen, and they're trying to do this. I mean, these people are absolute nuts. But there's a helpful chart here. So this is from the AP sources, the Deportation Data Project at UC Berkeley and UCLA. Obviously, this darker orange is Trump's second term. Just look at the absolutely insane rise. I mean, this is, if anything is important to Trump's top guy in the White House, Stephen Miller, these numbers are what's important to Trump's top guy. Now, this is January 2026. And then these killings happen in Minnesota. So look at the drop. Significant drop. And then it kind of is in a lull for a few months, February, March, April, May, and then spikes in June. They arrest 43,000 in June and now almost 50,000, just about 400 shy of 50,000 people. And again, as I said, more than half of these people, no criminal convictions, not even pending charges, just snatched off the street, oftentimes at traffic stops. They've gotten wise. They're not doing these big public spectacles anymore like they've been doing in Minnesota. It's
no more YouTube videos where they're bragging about it and filming themselves going up to doors.
I mean, it just hasn't been as public a spectacle. They're not doing it in, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but they're avoiding doing these things in affluent white enclaves, which they had been doing in Minnesota. I mean, the people who aren't normally touched by this kind of enforcement, we're seeing it right in front of them in Minnesota. And so now
people are just disappearing, Sam. You might not even know where your loved one is if they've been, you might not even know.
Yeah.
They have no way to contact you and let them know that they've been detained by ICE.
Yeah, and ICE quickly usually renditions them to another state. It just throws them completely across the country. So if that person or that family does happen to have a lawyer, then that lawyer, they has to figure out where they are, and then if they have to have their the legal qualifications to do stuff in this other state. There's all these things, and it's just it's inhumane. It's inhuman, frankly, what this government is doing.
Well, all the students are returning to campuses, to colleges this fall. It's happening right now in our area. I'm really worried about the international students. I mean, I'm sure they're not going to feel safe. I'm sure we're going to see a huge increase or decrease in the number of students coming to America because of this fear of ICE.
Great point. Jeez. Well, not just ICE. I mean, look at what happened to Mahmoud Khalil, and look at what happened to, I'm not going to be able to remember all the name. Rameza Ozturk, was that her name? The young woman who got snatched off the street just for writing an op-ed. All she did was write an op-ed. And they just, a bunch of goons in masks, unidentified, no identification at all, just pulled up an unmarked van and grabbed her off the street. Just for, this administration is vehemently against free speech rights, just vehemently against it. They, and that this whole conservative crying about not being able to say the R word, or not being able to, the cancel culture, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're very, very good, and have been for decades, at canceling people they don't like. And their canceling is way more pernicious because they use the incredible power of the state to cancel people. When, like Dave Chappelle got canceled, first of all, he still sells out stadiums. Second of all, his cancellation was a lot of his former fans who didn't like what he had to say anymore stopped going to his shows and were loud about it. That's canceling to Dave Chappelle. Well, Mahmoud Khalil got canceled by state goons showing up and ripping him away from his pregnant wife, who gave birth while he was disappeared somewhere. And, this is the kind of cancellation that's really dangerous. And it's all being committed by the same people who complained and complained and complained about themselves getting canceled, even though a lot of them continue to have huge audiences, and a lot of them continue to get huge amounts of money from right-wing organizations and billionaires and affiliations and all that kind of stuff. It's just gross. It's just so gross. I don't know what else to say.
So about that lawsuit that was settled by the social media Meta.
Oh, Meta, yeah.
Of what, $17 billion, 47 states. That is like a drop in the bucket. That is like not enough. Once they split it among 47 states, that does not cover the damage done.
No.
By their apps to young people. So I wonder how states will use that money.
I don't know exactly how to think about the lawsuit itself and the claims being made and all that. There's no doubt harm and damage has been done, and no doubt Facebook, or I should say Meta, and its executives knew what they were doing and did it callously and with complete disregard anyways. I don't think these states should have settled. I mean, Facebook's already lost, but they always settle. I mean, this is just par for the course.
I mean, make a calculation. The expense of going to court and dragging this out 10 years, right? And possibly losing. This is their calculation of risk and uncertainty. They figured that expense, this settlement, outweighs what they would get over time, and the cost of lawyers and, dragging it through this very slow process, which Meta could do. That's my guess, but I don't think did they settle with Europe yet? The European countries were also suing. We'll have to check on that.
I
compare it to if they settled that case.
But what I can say is that when the government sticks to its guns and keeps going, like when they did against IBM way back in the day, for instance, they disciplined IBM. IBM used to be the big bad kid on the block that just, anytime anyone started building their sandcastle, IBM would come in and just kick it over. I mean, they were a monopolist of monopolies, and the government went after them and disciplined the heck out of IBM to the point where IBM was so gun shy that they let Microsoft develop as a company, when normally their instinct was to kill Microsoft in the crib, and they could have, and they would have had the government not disciplined. And then 20 years later, the government did the same thing to Microsoft and scared Microsoft from doing that. And Microsoft kind of like kept their hands off when all of these companies that are rising now, Microsoft probably would have stepped in with the rise of Facebook and all these other things, but they had been disciplined. And so these kind of disciplinary actions, I mean, we're talking about regulatory actions from like the Federal Trade Commission and stuff like that. But this, I mean, suing the federal government or states, whatever, suing these companies also is a disciplinary action. So even if it takes years, and even if it results in less money in a settlement, the scars in the corporate culture would last. This is nothing. This is like, all we got to do is write a $17.1 billion check and restrict access to a certain degree to kids whose ages will verify, we promise.
I think if the DOJ, if we're in a different administration in a different time, we need the authority and power and the bank of the DOJ, of the federal government, I think, really to pursue and take it through the process of the court system. But
yeah,
I'm not an attorney, but I think states just don't have the resources to do that. That's the problem.
Potentially. Well, we need our regulatory agencies is what we need. I mean, if you remember, we talked about it briefly in our conversation with Scott Latterman, but we talked a little bit about like the Biden appointees in those places, like Lena Khan. You and I have talked. I mean, she was great. And she actually was going after, Meta, and she was going after these companies. She went after Apple hard for what they were doing with the iPhone messages, iMessages and stuff like that, which was a crazy monopolistic endeavor. And, and she was working on disciplining a lot of these monopoly hungry companies. And then workers' rights with Biden's NLRB pick and all that kind of stuff. I mean, who the president is and who the president appoints is so important. Like from the standpoint of what is your FEC going to do? What is your FTC going to do? What is your FCC going to do? All of these regulatory agencies that can make a massive difference in people's lives. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which basically has been destroyed by Donald Trump, it's dead. Protected Americans. And, you could have a zombie as your president whose brain barely works, but if they're appointing people like Lena Khan and like, some of these other names are escaping me at the moment, but if you're appointing these kind of people into those positions who are doing excellent work on behalf of the American people, it doesn't matter if your brain doesn't work. The but on that was, Joe Biden's foreign policy, which is like so horrific, I don't even want to get into it. But the point is like the other side of the coin was the elevation of these very important people into these very important positions. And when we do see 2028, and hopefully a Democrat gets in, who they appoint to these positions, because if they go down that route that we've talked about before, that I've complained about, Clinton's, Obama picking basically all of Clinton's economic people. If we go down that route again, I mean, I think
but we have to. I think the Senate has to flip for confirmation too on some of the cabinet appointments. But we'll see. I mean,
you mean for the second half of Trump?
No, after 2028.
Right. Well, I will say to that, Trump has, and the Supreme Court has backed him in just appointing people and letting them stick in those positions for however long they want. I mean,
they put him in deputy director position, so they don't need Senate confirmation, but they're really running the show.
Yeah. So, I mean, a Democratic president can use the same tools that the Supreme Court has let Trump get away with. I'm sure the Republicans would put in lawsuits, and I'm sure the Supreme Court would reverse itself because they don't care about precedent. They're a political cartel. As I said, they're a criminal organization. I was saying yesterday, and that's all they're going to do. I mean, it's completely nuts. So, do you want to just go over the Oman, Iran, Strait of Hormuz thing real quick here? This is, it's just important to note what happened. Because this agreement came out to... So Iran has been talking with Oman, because if you can picture the Strait of Hormuz, I mean, obviously Iran is on the north side of the strait, but there's this sharp point that sticks out from the Arabian Peninsula, and that's the country of Oman. And so the Strait of Hormuz is 26 miles between Iran and Oman. It's very narrow, and only a certain portion of that 26 miles across, only a certain amount of that is actually navigable, like deep enough for these massive oil tankers to get through. And so they've been working together for their own framework, having nothing to do with what the United States wants, or I should say what Donald Trump wants. Absolutely no consideration whatsoever for that. At this point, they don't care, because the U.S. keeps changing its position.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they wanted to operate under that memorandum of understanding that Trump signed back in June. They can't operate under that because Trump didn't operate under it for more than, a handful of days. So it's in Farsi, I think. I'm not sure what language it's in, but here's a short excerpt in translation from a guy who follows all this stuff. So, the proposed framework includes creating a temporary joint operation through the Strait of Hormuz for the purpose of implementing a joint corridor through the strait, with the goal of managing a single corridor for permanent and future management of the strait, as well as providing mechanisms for information exchange, traffic management, and security-related services. In other words, we're going to control this puppy. We're going to be in charge of everything about it. And there's just going to be one route that we're going to oversee. End of discussion. Now, there's more details about them doing joint sea mine removal, although Donald Trump claims that it's already been completely demined. But as everything that comes out of this man's mouth, it's a lie. Yeah, just trust me. We control the strait, according to Trump. I mean, So this statement is meaningful for everybody not inside the Trump administration, but everything outside the Trump administration. I think it's also important to point out that information now is leaking that that we had been operating under the assumption that Trump was receiving pushback from his Joint Chief of Staff, Dean Cain, General Dean Cain. Apparently, no. Apparently, he was not pushing back. Apparently, he said, "You know what? If you want to do it, we can get it done for you."
Wow.
And he's been trying to massage and manage his reputation by hinting that that was not the case. But apparently, Trump was told in no uncertain terms by various people exactly what would happen. They were right about everything. And he did not listen to them because Hegseth and Dean Cain and Netanyahu said, no, we can get this done. It'll all be good. And he believed them because he's Donald Trump.
He wanted to believe them too. So it made it a lot easier.
Yeah. And so this is all just, the whole world is ignoring Besant. I mean, China's ignoring Besant. Everybody's ignoring Besant. And by the way, Jen, I had jokingly brought up that a lot of people thought that Washington Post or Wall Street Journal op-ed written by Stanley Druckenmiller that you mentioned. And I said, people think that's AI. And you're like, oh, I'm sure it is. Well,
proof.
Jeff Stein from the news organization Notice contacted Stanley Druckenmiller, and he says that Druckenmiller tells me, of course I used AI to write the op-ed.
Good for him for being honest.
Quote, there's a reason I moved from an English major to being an economics major. I'm not embarrassed by it.
Okay. Well, Jeff 1 point for being honest. and that he's an econ major. Like it.
He's a billionaire, so he's not like most econ majors. Jeff Stein says no response from the Wall Street Journal.
He should at least acknowledge that at the bottom of his column, right?
I agree.
That's
the Wall Street Journal
policy.
should acknowledge it. This is bad form for the Wall Street Journal. They should have. The editors should have known it.
Wow.
I mean, if it was that obvious.
That paper's a lot. That's not that Bezos owns it, right? It's no, that's the Wall Street Journal.
Rupert Murdoch.
I'm thinking of Washington Post. Okay,
yes, yeah. Yeah, well, there's both terrible, horrible owners. And that's something. So just a quick preview. Tomorrow we're going to have a guy who runs an independent newspaper, and it's one of the things we're going to talk about is the consolidation of media and this kind of like massive corporate takeover of all our media, and how journalism has changed and how we need to interact with journalism. So I'm excited about that interview tomorrow. But so that's kind of our foreign policy beat, as it were. There's a lot to talk about electorally. I know you had been you kept bringing up the Darlene Graham thing. Anything you want to say about that?
Okay, so she won with 52% of those who voted for her, right? 52%?
52 and a half.
Okay.
Well, versus
so
47 and a half.
Two and a half points. She won by 2.5 points.
No, she won by 5%.
Okay, I know, but when you're looking at the results, it's how much over 50% did they get? That's how I evaluate it to win. Okay. But there's two candidates, and so that's a very close race, honestly. And you would think she would have done much better just because of the name, because of Trump, and they poured a ton of money into that race. So if you're not supportive of Trump, worried about things, I don't know, she should have won by much more. Should have been more greater, at least 10 points, 15 points maybe. But
well, she's not exactly a talented politician, as you pointed out. I genuinely don't think that her foreign policy flubs had anything to do with this. I think it had much more to do with the fact that people just don't really know much about her or have that much trust in her. And Ralph Norman is a much more known commodity. There's still, her last name is Graham. She's in South Carolina, and Trump backed her. I mean, that was enough. And
I don't know what was turnout like for this special?
Well, the total votes is about 380,000 or so. I don't know how that stacks up compared to the past. I'm not at all knowledgeable about South Carolina politics. I will say this: I was on the Secretary of State or the Election Commission's website trying to figure out what the breakdown was by congressional district. Mm-hmm. They don't do that breakdown. They only do breakdowns by county. So I couldn't figure out that for sure if Ralph Norman was able to at least win his own district. I think he did, but I mean, unfortunately, his district kind of straddles these counties, but does not include the capital city. And the county with the capital city was a Darlene Graham county, but his district that includes that county is all outside of the capital city. So I'm guessing that he did win his district, not by much, but I'm guessing that he did at least win his own district. The only counties he won were the northwest counties, which is, that's rural Appalachian, South Carolina. They're northwest.
But back to Darlene Graham. Now, I thought her speeches were good. I mean, I thought she was able to connect with her audiences, with voters. She just lacks the experience for the position, especially on foreign policy, national security. But I think she was strong campaigning as a candidate in her speeches and how she framed things.
Good on the stump.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Right. Well, I mean, as many people have pointed out, she has all of her brother's staffers who are very, very, very tight with K Street and all the lobbyists and all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense
and they want to keep their jobs, so they need her to get elected.
There is a small side story to this race that's just interesting to point out because, of course, you and I have been complaining a lot about the money pouring into Democratic primaries, especially Republican money through AIPAC, which is mostly funded by Republicans. Well, there was kind of a reverse in South Carolina. Ralph Norman, earlier in his career, was a friend to renewable energy, and at some point he betrayed them. And he turned viciously against renewable energy and especially solar. And so there were solar energy super PACs throwing money behind Darlene Graham. Now, she's not supportive of green energy, but it was just revenge money against Ralph Norman, and it was successful. Again, it's not a huge win for Graham, considering what was arrayed behind her, Donald Trump and all that stuff.
Right.
But still, I mean, I guess those solar people money.
Well, they actually got their PAC, the Alternative Energy PAC. They got very engaged and active in the primaries. So they were in a lot of races, supporting candidates who support alternative energy. So this hurt, I'm sure, many Republicans in their primaries.
Well, the head of that PAC is a former Move On guy.
I
mean, he, which is wild to think. I mean, he's one of those rare people on the left side of politics who's actually really good at business. He goes on and makes a fortune in that world. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fan of these PACs or any of this corporate stuff.
Well, we spend hundreds of billions on elections. People are getting wealthy on the campaign side.
No doubt. And that's, that's a kind of a good segue to talk about this Michigan general situation going on, because part of the reason that a lot of centrist Democrats are upset is because especially people like Neera Tanden, who's the director of the Center for American Progress, which is what Obama for America turned into. She's been the head of that organization for forever now. She was a Clinton person, an Obama person. And in fact, she was on the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2008 when they launched all those viciously racist attacks against Obama. A lot of people think that Neera Tanden was behind a lot of those attacks. So she's been around a long time, very, very, very cynical political operator. And she's a big, AIPAC and Israel ally and stuff like that. So she cannot shut up on Twitter. She is an addict and a constant poster, and she just gets in beefs. Now, she does sometimes get in beefs with Republicans and those on the right, but it seems like her bread and butter is just trashing people to the left of her. I mean, that's what she spends all of her time doing. It's just amazing. And so she has been one of the top Hasan Piker haters for a long time. And she just spends huge amounts of energy just
you think that might hurt
her
CAP, the Center for American Progress. I thought that predated Obama, but I guess not. Okay.
No, it grew out of Obama for America. I mean,
she should be more cautious about what she says publicly.
She's totally not conscious. She did this crazy interview with El-Sayed. I'm forgetting his last name, but I think it's with Vox Media. But she kind of came off as though she'd had a couple of drinks before she did the interview. That's kind of the vibe that she was giving off. But, she was laughing about like her Twitter personality and saying, yeah, I should probably rein it in. Ha ha ha. I mean, it's just, she seems to go off the rails. She's on CNN all the time, and she's like kind of a reliable bash the left Democrat on CNN. That's why they love her, because she's reliably going to attack the left and candidates on the left, by the way. And she even attacks former employees of CAP. Like CAP had once asked this guy Wajahat Ali to write a whole research paper, a whole like documented long thing about Islamophobia in American politics, and paid for by CAP and all that kind of stuff. And he's one of her favorite targets on Twitter. She attacks him all the time. Wow. But to kind of set up this whole thing, because Mike Rogers is just gleeful that he has all these Democrats who are unhappy with the left doing well, and they seem to not care if Abdul El-Sayed wins or loses. And so Mike Rogers is giddy about this. So he's just pointing to what they say. Oh, yeah, Neera Tanden, what she said, and all this kind of stuff. And by the way, I mean, do I need to do you know who Laura Loomer is? Jen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in case you're watching and you don't know, Laura Loomer is this extremely Islamophobic, deeply, deeply like disturbed a person who has, for some reason, an enormous amount of influence over Donald Trump personally. She earlier in his term, this time around, she would like tweet out, I think so and so should be fired. And within a couple of days, they were fired. I mean, that's the kind of like, I don't know if she still has that pull because Trump obviously switches hot and cold with people very quickly, but she's been very, very influential. And she's, very much a Stephen Miller kind of ally and in that thing, anti-immigrant, all that kind of stuff. She is a real, like Stephen Miller, just horrible. And she said some insanely Islamophobic stuff about Abdul El-Sayed and Hasan Piker. And Neera Tanden retweeted it and said, can't believe I agree with Laura Loomer.
Wow.
It's gross stuff. And what is it that they, obviously the larger story with Hasan Piker is he's putting the weight of his community and his platform behind these leftist candidates. And they don't like that. They don't like that, he's kind of stepping on their toes, because as we were talking about, these billions of dollars being spent on ads, being spent on campaigns, a lot of that, there are these consultants who make a huge amount of money who are the go-betweens. So how do these consultants make their money? Yeah, they're salaried or they make money from the campaign, but the real thing is they have friends that do the actual ad making and then put the ads on the air. And when they say, hey, every candidate I work with is going to do all their ads through you. So when we pay you, I get a cut. That's how a lot of them make a lot of their money. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you're a candidate that's not taking corporate PAC money and you're going to independent media places like Hasan Piker, you get a huge audience without having to spend any of this money. And so if Hasan Piker actually puts the full force of his community, which is millions of people who like either watch his Twitch stream or the many, many more people who just watch clips of him. That's how I'm familiar. I don't get on Twitch or anything. I'm just familiar from clips on YouTube.
Well, who could spend all day watching him? It doesn't he?
It's one of those things where you just
for like 8 hours.
8 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Who can do that?
Well, it's just something you have on the background. Some people have Fox News on the background all day. Other people have, Twitch, Hasan Piker on in the background all day. But I don't know, Twitch. I don't know really anything about Twitch, to be honest with you. I just see clips. Like I love when he does interviews because they're always interesting. I mean, he's a very, very well-read, thoughtful guy, which is not the image, obviously, that he's being painted with. He's being painted as this crazy psycho guy who just says these unhinged things. And the thing is, he's been doing this streaming 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for years and years. And it's always the same 5 or 6 clips that they play. It's like if he was this crazy, out of control dude, you'd think they'd have hours of content to point to where he says crazy stuff, but they don't. That's telling. But anyways, he was recently talking about one of the candidates for Congress in Michigan, who's a Democrat, Moss, who is refusing to endorse Abdul El-Sayed. And this guy's AIPAC-backed, very pro-Israel. And basically, Hasan Piker was talking about this situation and saying, look, this saying that all Jews have to also be Zionists, this conflation of Israel with Judaism, is dangerous for all Jews, and it's dangerous for American Jews. And the blowback can harm Jewish people. If you're saying any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, and then you see Israel committing a genocide, that's bad for Jews, and that can cause harm to actual Jews. Well, he's been clipped in such a way now where it looks like and it doesn't, even in the bad clip, it doesn't speak this, but Moss and Neera Tanden and a bunch of these other people are saying that Hasan Piker just called for violence against Michigan Jews. That's what they're claiming, which is absolutely ridiculous and completely debunked just by, I think even watching their clip, it gets debunked. But certainly if you watch, several seconds before and after, it's clear what he's talking about. But anyways, Abdul El-Sayed's people, his comms team. So he had a statement and he tweeted out the statement. The statement's fine. The problem is the caption for the statement was, "Here are my comments regarding Hasan Piker." Which this is a mistake. He campaigned with Hasan Piker and, Hasan was at several of Abdul El-Sayed's events. He can't separate himself from Hasan Piker. So to even have the hint of separation just looks bad. He shouldn't have done that. The statement itself is fine, and it doesn't even mention Hasan Piker in the statement. But then captioning the statement with, "Here's the Hasan Piker thing." Meanwhile, and this is the part that's absolutely batshit insane, Mike Rogers, the Republican in this race, hired 2 people for this student outreach thing. So these are actually people hired by his campaign. Cameron Dundas of Northwestern Michigan College and Alexander Richman of the University of Michigan. So they identify themselves as part of his campaign, as officials on his campaign. These people are just, their background, there's just tons of misogynistic, racist, anti-LGBTQ stuff. It's gross. It's disgusting. And not a peep from media about this. Everything is focused on Hasan Piker. And the reason is because all of these other, this Moss guy, and then Hillary Skolton, who is a sitting member of Congress herself, the Democrats that just want to focus on Hasan Piker and refuse to endorse Abdul El-Sayed. So
I guess they want Mike Rogers to win, Sam.
This is the problem.
Yeah.
They'd rather discipline someone on the left and say, no, you can't step in on our party, than win the Senate. And this, I remember saying that I was worried that this would happen. But then I backed off on that a little bit because if you remember, right after the primary, everybody, kind of seemed to hold hands and say, okay, we're all going to get behind Abdul El-Sayed because beating Mike Rogers is more important. And it seemed like we were all singing Kumbaya. Well, no longer. But I want to, there was a CNN about a month ago did a profile of Hasan Piker, not just Hasan Piker, but they did this longer form video that was partially a profile of Hasan and his involvement in these races. And Donnie O'Sullivan, who did the thing with CNN, just in light of what's been going on, he reposted this moment from his interview with Hasan Piker, which directly addresses this question about, do you think in the general, he asked this question of Hasan, do you think in the general you'll be a problem for Abdul El-Sayed? And I think this is very much worth watching because it goes to this whole theory that that Abdul El-Sayed's message about Medicare for all and affordability is going to overcome any of this culture war nonsense. And I totally agree with Hasan Piker in this theory.
You might have helped El-Sayed in the primary, but you think that you might hurt him, that his affiliation with you might hurt El-Sayed in the general election?
No, absolutely not. Because for progressives and for socialists in particular, like Bernie Sanders especially as well, getting out of the primary is a far more difficult battle than winning in the general. This is our theory. The reason for that is because Republicans don't have a vision for change. Socialists do. Or even someone like Abdul El-Sayed, who's not a socialist, but very progressive. He has a vision for change. He's a real fighter. And as long as we can get that vision in front of as many people as possible, the opposition looks silly when they try to focus on culture war issues. If we stick to kitchen table problems, if we stick to issues that pertain to the material realities that the working class are facing, and if we earnestly communicate and advocate for their struggles and say, here's how we're going to solve this issue: Medicare for all, no more money on endless militarism. Let's reconsider our relationship with Israel, especially at a time when Israel has goaded the United States of America into waging war in Iran. And that's actually had a horrible effect on gas prices. When we communicate to people in the general, and the opposition's reaction to that is, well, what about trans people? What about Abdul El-Sayed being Muslim? If that's the only thing they got, people will make that right choice. I'll say, no, I think I'm going to go with the guy who wants to give me health care. That's the theory.
I agree with him. You know what? I think people in Michigan are sick of hearing about Hasan Piker, because I just was in Michigan, and my mom is listening to lots of different news sources, including conservative. And that's what she's like, who's this Hasan Piker guy? I'm so sick of hearing about this guy. And Republicans, if that's what Mike Rogers is saying, and he's focused on that, and he's not talking about solutions and only culture stuff, I think Hasan Piker is right that Abdul's going to do better in the general, because he's talking about issues people actually care about, right?
Yep.
I think he's right. I'm tired of hearing about Hasan Piker, and I'm not in Michigan.
And by the way, like what you just saw, that thoughtful, commentary with a lot of points, or he's bringing up a lot of good ideas, and he has a lot of like genuinely substantive stuff to say in that answer. That's the majority of his commentary. Obviously he's also an entertainer so he'll throw in swear words from time to time, and he'll get a little goofy from time to time. But the bulk of his commentary that I've seen looks just like that. Very thoughtful, very careful. I mean, the problem is when he gets a little bit uncareful, and then, and he's yelling at somebody, because when this Twitch thing is, he has this chat that's constantly running, and he's always looking at it. So people will ask him questions, and he'll just answer them. And sometimes he gets, haters in there who say nasty things, and he'll read their chats aloud. And then him reading these nasty people to yell at them, that's what gets clipped. And then they say that Hasan Piker himself is advocating for whatever this has happened in chat. And so that's why this thing has gotten really, really, really silly. But on the point of El-Sayed focusing on the right things, he was on Jesse Waters last night or the night before. Like all these days are kind of running together. I think it was it was Tuesday. It doesn't
matter, Sam.
I think it was Tuesday night. Well,
it's still summer, so.
I think it was Monday night. I'm just looking at the date of the tweet I'm looking at. So Jesse Waters is the very, very, very much less impressive fill-in for Tucker Carlson, who was the replacement himself of Bill O'Reilly. So this is the same slot that Bill O'Reilly used to hold on Fox News back in the day before he got canned for being a sex pest. Then Tucker Carlson, who got canned for essentially bringing on Fox that Dominion lawsuit. Now Jesse Waters is filling that seat. He's much less impressive. And for the most part, I think Abdul El-Sayed did an exceptional job dealing with Jesse Waters. But here's a little moment of that where he's just driving home exactly what Hasan Piker was just talking about, which is dealing with these kitchen table issues that are far more important to people than the nonsense that Jesse Waters wants the interview to be about.
You know what the issue is in America, in Michigan?
What?
The issue that people are worried about is not that somehow somebody's going to come and push Sharia law on them. The issue in Michigan is people are worried about how they're going to afford their gas. The issue in Michigan is, how am I going to see a doctor when I get sick? How am I going to keep my job? You're out here, honestly, you guys love to play this culture war game. where you use these words that sound really foreign to avoid actually having to talk about the issues that everyday people like to talk about. Now, look, Mike Rogers is the guy I'm running against for U.S. Senate. And I know that you've had him on your show. Maybe he answers questions. I don't know if he does.
I've actually never had him on.
Only, but look, you haven't. So he's ducking your show, too, because he's ducking. Look, can we all agree? Like,
I haven't
Jesse,
invited him on.
We're going to have a debate, right? Can we all agree that Mike Rogers is a beta? Can we all agree with that?
I haven't even had him on.
Dude won't even come on your show because he's afraid of getting grilled.
He talks fast. He needs to slow down a little bit, but he doesn't want to give the interviewer any time, right? He wants to get his message out there and just talk.
Well,
whatever,
okay, Jen.
but
Right, Jen.
I don't watch that program, so I don't even like
Jesse wouldn't let Abdul get a word in edgewise nearly the entire hour. He's constantly interrupting.
I needed the context, but all
right. So I just gave you the context. But the point is that, like, first of all, he's like redirecting this question that's about Sharia law. Aren't you for Sharia law? Aren't you going to bring Sharia law to Michigan? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, look, this culture war nonsense. Here's what I'm trying to do, which is exactly what Piker was saying in that little Donny O'Sullivan clip. I mean, this is key to this race. And I just think it was hilarious that, he challenged Mike Rogers to even go on Jesse Waters, which would be a softball friendly interview if he did, but very funny. Very good stuff.
I'm sure they invited Mike Rogers. Jesse maybe didn't, but his production folks probably did try to invite him and he said no.
Yeah, he's probably ducking media as much as possible because he's not feeling up to the task. I don't know.
But going back to the Dems beating each other up in this race, beating up Abdul and Hasan Piker, I'm like, they have the option of just not saying anything. Okay, they don't have to go out and campaign for Abdul or, do a commercial for him. But just don't say anything if you don't support him, right? Don't make his chances worse. Just be neutral, right? Run your own race and ignore this race.
I can't disagree with you on that.
But
so I normally I just don't spend much time listening to these former Republicans, the Never Trumper crowd and all this kind of stuff, but it just popped up in my feed, this interview that John Harwood, who now works for Zateo News, which is Mehdi Hasan's outlet. It's a lot of famous Hassans. You got Hassan Minhaj, Mehdi Hasan, Hasan Piker. But anyways, so John Harwood does, interviews now, does a little YouTube show for Zateo News, and he interviewed Stuart Stevens. So Stuart Stevens is a former George W. Bush and Mitt Romney guy. And, he's with the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson's outfit. So normally I don't really give these kind of guys the time of day. But in this interview that I randomly decided to listen to, Stuart Stevens says something I thought was really interesting because you're sick of these Democrats beating each other up. John Harwood asked if there is a future for the Republican Party because Stevens thinks the Republicans are just done for. Like they're just not a viable party anymore. They're just a bunch of extremists. And
that's why Tucker Carlson's group is going to start a different Republican Party.
Maybe. So Harwood's like, but there's still going to be two parties. And Stuart Stevens says, yeah. I mean, you could argue that right now there's three. There's the Republicans, and then you have this Democratic Party that's fighting itself. And Stuart Stevens' prediction, and keep in mind that predictive-wise, politically, he's been wrong a lot. A lot. Like, he thought for sure that Trump could not possibly be successful in so he missed all of this stuff. He's been wrong a lot lately. So take this with a grain of salt. But I thought it was interesting that he said he sees if we're going to have two viable parties, they're probably going to come out of this rift in the Democratic Party where clearly they don't like each other. And I'm like, okay, well, because Jared Moskowitz, who, as I said yesterday, has just been elevated by Hakeem Jeffries to be the head of the subcommittee that deals with the Middle East, which is nuts. He said outright, I cannot be in the same party as these DSA people. And he's not the only one that's saying this. There's a lot of these guys saying this. What the bald guy from Louisiana, Carville, James Carville. I mean, he said the same thing. So there are, yackers that are saying this. There are actual elected officials who are saying this. It's getting pretty ugly out there. And so it shouldn't surprise us that Abdul El-Sayed is under attack from all sides.
But the fastest growing party is the party of no party, or independence, right? Because people don't want to associate with Democrats or Republicans. They're pissed off at both parties. And so they don't identify as either. So what's Andrew Yang's party called? I think I just read something today that they are going to try to start a more serious party and recruit former Democrats or Democrats to run as under their banner.
Great. So let's send Jared Moskowitz to them.
So maybe it's going to be people who don't, this whole new thing that we haven't even thought of, another party that pulls, folks from independents, non-party folks, and maybe Dems, maybe some Republicans. Who knows? It's hard to predict what will happen.
Yeah. Well,
it is very difficult to start a third party. That's why most people say we're stuck with two parties, Republicans and Democrats.
Well, it took basically the slavery crisis to get a third party up and running before. I mean, the Republican Party, it was the Democrats and the Whigs. And the Republican Party was made up of mostly disaffected Whigs and some anti-slavery Democrats in the North. There weren't that many of them. But that's, the Republican Party came about basically on primary issue of abolition. And then, has morphed dramatically over the years to become the party of the South, as it were, with the Southern strategy, Nixon, Goldwater, all that stuff. But yeah, it's interesting how parties evolve over time, how they get created, how they die. But yeah, the way our laws are written, it's really just a two-party system. There's no real way around that.
And until we have campaign finance reform, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Robert Reich, he really points to Democrats making a deal with the devil back in the late 70s and early 80s when they decided to start taking corporate money. Because the 70s is when the door really opened to campaign finance getting whacked out. That's when the Supreme Court first kind of nudged open the door on that. Obviously, it got way worse in the early 2000s with Citizens United. But yeah, they cracked the door open. And Robert Reich kind of points to that moment when Democrats decided, you know what, we're going to, because he puts the blame. He was briefly part of the Clinton administration, Robert Reich.
He was the Secretary of Labor.
Yeah,
he got
badly
upset
mistreated.
In the second term, he wasn't reappointed. Yes.
Yeah,
but he is a brilliant economist, progressive, very popular professor at Berkeley.
Yeah, well, Scott Bessent has been calling him out by name and trashing him lately. So,
well, they want to blame someone, Sam. They got to blame Biden and
going all
Reich.
The way back to Robert Reich.
Why not? People don't know. They just don't need to blame other people that aren't in charge.
By the way, the side note: Robert Reich's son, Sam Reich, is a very successful entertainer that runs an online comedy channel that's very successful.
I had no idea. So. Well, I can see that his father's kind of funny. He's entertaining.
Yeah, very talented family. That's one of the good Sams out there. That's one of the Sams we heartily approve of out there. When I have to deal with a guy like Sam Altman.
I wonder if Robert Reich's son helps him produce his awesome videos he makes every day. He also has a Substack. Check it out.
Right. Well, I don't know. He probably has a whole staff for that. Sam seems pretty busy. Robert Reich is still up in the San Francisco area, and that whole comedy thing is going down in LA area. So, but yeah, no, this is like these are really interesting questions about the future of the Democratic Party. And I think, and this is a great segue because we also want to talk about the battles going on next week as we prepare to watch more primaries come in, Jen. So there are 4 races in Massachusetts. Massachusetts, I believe, is the only state that has a primary next week. So it's the only one to watch. New Hampshire is the week after. So there are 4 races I want to highlight briefly. First and foremost is the Senate race, which we've talked about a few times, but that's pitting the very aged Senator Ed Markey, who's claim to fame. He's really good on environmental issues. I think that's kind of where he's stood out. He's been a big proponent of renewable energy and dealing with the climate crisis, calling out the climate crisis. I mean, simple things, but he's definitely he's being challenged by Representative Seth Moulton, who's leaving the 6th congressional district to run in this race because they have the same rules as Minnesota. You can't run in both at the same time. So Seth Moulton is he's a more conservative Democrat. He's this more corporate branded conservative Democrat. So this is that unusual case, and I've compared it to the Connecticut House race with John Larson, where you've got this older, aging incumbent who's actually to the left of the younger, fresher face, who's more corporate-backed and to the right, blah, blah, blah. So from what I understand, it looks as though Ed Markey really kind of has control of this race. But, polling being what it's been, the few polls that have come out show that this isn't that close of a contest. But also this is another one of these races that's kind of flown mostly under the national media radar. And Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have come on strong to support Ed Markey in this one. So we'll see where it goes, but it looks good for Ed Markey. And I know, Jen, you know a lot more about Ed Markey than I do, if you want to add anything there.
No, I have nothing to add. You didn't want to comment on the race in Oklahoma for governor, or?
Oh,
they have their primary yesterday?
Did.
Okay.
I did. Yeah, I completely forgot about Oklahoma.
Wasn't there a special in Georgia too?
No.
No? Okay. Let me go.
Well, wait.
You look that up.
I don't think so. But, okay, so there was a runoff for the Ohio governor for GOP, which, if you care, the guy that got Trump's endorsement is the guy that won. Mike Matt I don't know. Mazzei. If it's Italian, I don't know. But anyways, I think Oklahoma also did vote to enshrine their voter ID law into the Constitution. We did talk a little bit about that. And they held their superintendent GOP runoff. Now, Oklahoma's been dealing with some awful head of schools for the state. And it is Tulsa educator Robert Franklin who won. So he beat the church pastor who was fired as a high school teacher. So it seems like this slightly less crazy person might have won that one, but I'm no expert on that. So there you go. I touched on Oklahoma. Anything you want to add about that?
But related to vote by mail, which we talked about extensively in our last episode. So the update is that judge removed the injunction.
The second injunction.
And I think the reason is so now people can, change their lawsuit, litigate under the assumption that now this rule by the Postal Service can actually harm people. Now that it's published and going to be enacted. And so now I think the Supreme Court hopefully can come to a different conclusion, and they can write their briefs and perspectives in their litigation that now there's harm can be done, I think.
Got it.
And hopefully that can be resolved before the midterm.
Got it.
So hopefully the Supreme Court, I mean, once this goes to the Supreme Court, can rule with different perspective based on, now actually harm can be done. People's vote can be taken away by the Postal Service, violating the Constitution.
Right. Well, it seems so open and shut because the plain language of the Constitution, I mean, it's so clear that it's not constitutional. But
I know.
You can't trust
So it should be pretty easy to litigate this, right? In a court of law.
You would think.
Oh, let's cross our fingers the justices get this right, do the right thing by the people.
All right.
And save our democracy.
Indeed. Well, shall we return to Massachusetts?
Yes. What did you find?
So there are 3 more races I want to bring up. We've got 8th District, Massachusetts 8th District. There's a longtime incumbent, Stephen Lynch, and he faces a much younger opponent in Patrick Roth, who's bringing up instances where Lynch, who's pretty darn conservative, where Lynch has broke with the Democrats. Lynch actually voted against the Affordable Care Act back in 2009. So Democratic dissatisfaction with this guy goes back quite a ways.
And they're just getting around to dealing with that.
Well, no, they've had people run against him in the past. It's just he's survived it all.
No.
I don't know much about these Massachusetts district and their makeup, but this is a year where progressive challengers are winning a lot.
That's right.
So it's a year where that might happen. Now, I'm not saying that Roth is this big time progressive. He's not DSA endorsed, anything like that. He is running as someone who will be significantly more progressive than Lynch. Lynch has even backed some of Donald Trump's crap. So, I mean, he's kind of an Angie Craig style.
That's not gonna fly.
Right.
He's not gonna win.
Well, I mean, he's survived. So, I mean, he's been in power there 25 years in this seat.
That's the other thing, that they want younger people. They want new blood.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened to John Larson in Connecticut. The younger guy won. But Roth is he worked for Barack Obama, and then he also worked for Governor Deval Patrick in Massachusetts. So he's got
he's got credibility.
He's got some
credibility. He knows how to campaign.
Yeah. But, I mean, Lynch is countering by saying that Roth has political support from private equity and from the pharmaceutical industry. But having said that, Roth did commit, I don't know if he has or hasn't, but he did commit not to take any corporate PAC money. So
that's good.
We'll see how that goes. Almost the same dynamics in Massachusetts 1st District. We've got another ancient incumbent. 77-year-old Richard Neal is running again. I mean, but to be fair, Ed Markey is this age as well. I mean, he's very old as well. But so Richard Neal is being challenged by 39-year-old high school teacher Jeremy Whalen. So Whalen is challenging Neal on his accepting corporate PAC money and his opposition to Medicare for all. So Neal is against Medicare for all. So that could be right there, in a year where it's throw the bums out on the left, for Democrats, that might be enough. But these are upstart challenges. They're not very well funded. They're refusing corporate PAC money. So it's all down to how's their ground game. And I don't know what kind of organizational backing they have. These are not DSA supported people, so they're not getting that kind of organizational backing, but I don't know exactly, what's going on with those races. I'm just telling you about the much more interesting and much more dramatic is what's going on in the district that Seth Moulton has vacated, Massachusetts 6th District. There's a drama going on there that's very similar to what happened in Minnesota's 2nd District, which was the seat that Angie Craig vacated to run for Senate unsuccessfully here in Minnesota. So if you'll recall, in that race, I mistakenly thought that one candidate was to the left of a different candidate. And part of that was by design because a lot of money got...
you.
Yes, you did at the time. Thank goodness. But part of that was because you knew the people. So you actually...
Of course.
So you actually like knew what their background was. So one of the candidates was essentially lying about her background, saying she was further to the left than she has historically been. And she got actual backing from national organizations that endorse leftist candidates. So I saw a couple of those endorsements and was like, oh, well, she must be to the left of the DFL endorsed candidate, Matt Little, when in fact that was not the case. It was a ruse. And AIPAC money was behind the ruse. The same thing is happening in this race in Massachusetts. So, in that Minnesota race, a different Matt Klein, was the kind of AIPAC, conservative Democrat pick. In this race in Massachusetts, that's Dan Coe, who is probably going to win. I mean, he's in the driver's seat in this race. Dan Coe, he's, I think he was an Biden guy, Biden staffer, and back in the day. And he's got, the support of Biden and Harris and all that kind of stuff. So he's got that very, very solid, institutional Democratic support, which is not like the Minnesota race where Matt Little had the party endorsement and Matt Klein had the kind of corporate endorsement. Dan Coe has both of those things, but he is more in the line of Seth Moulton as far as his politics. Now, there are several other people running. There's 5 other people running, but there are 2 names I want to mention in particular. Tram Nguyen and Jamie Belcito, both women. Now, Jamie Belcito did an interview with with Breaking Points to kind of explain the situation a little bit. She had been approached by an organization called Elect Democratic Women, EDW. Sounds nice, right? Sounds lovely. Well, the same group actually spent money on Kayla Berg in the Minnesota race. Where do you think Elect Democratic Women as an organization, where does most of their money come from?
AIPAC.
You got it. So $450,000 comes flooding into this Massachusetts race on behalf of Tram Nguyen. And she's taken positions to the left of where she used to be. I mean, there's video of her answering questions from back in February where she's one way. And then lo and behold, things change. So what Jamie Belcito, who's the real, actual long-time consistent leftist in this race, she was approached by Elect Democratic Women. And they said, we feel like a woman should win this race, and we want to get behind you. And just accept AI, crypto, and AIPAC money, and you'll win. And Belcito said, hell no. It's like, I have standards. I'm not doing that. So she declined the money. And then they went to Tram Nguyen, and Tram Nguyen accepted the money and has gotten endorsements from some very respectable, she, like Ayanna Pressley, a member of the squad, has endorsed Tram Nguyen. This is very confusing, just like that Minnesota race.
Well, they were going to split with so many running. They're going to split the vote.
This
so
is the problem.
Has the most name recognition.
The left is deeply split. Yeah. Well, both Tram Nguyen and Jamie Belcito are local elected officials. Mm-hmm. Well, and so is Dan Coe for that matter. But Coe obviously is getting the institutional
So you're
support.
betting Dan Coe will win this race.
I mean, yeah, he's got all the big guns.
And when are they voting? When is the primary in Massachusetts?
Tuesday.
Okay, so we'll have an update
1st.
next week. Is that it for Massachusetts?
That's it. So 1st, 6th, and 8th congressional district, and then, of course, U.S. Senate race.
Did you hear about the 15-year-old who's running for governor in Vermont?
No.
Apparently, you can be non-voting age and run for governor. His name is Dean Roy. I guess he's a Gen Zer. Not happy with current elected officials. So,
well, Vermont is one of those odd places that keeps electing Democrats to the governorship, not Democrats, Republicans to the governorship, and then also Bernie Sanders to the Senate. It's one of those states that like diverge massively between who they send to Washington versus who they send to Montpelier in the case of Vermont. So, yeah,
but he's got a platform. People should check him out. Mm-hmm.
If you'll allow me, Jen, something just popped in front of me here. There's another interesting thing happening on September 1st in Missouri. There's a recall election. So I'm going to read you what Bolt Magazine has to say about it. I'll just read their little blurb. So in Independence, Missouri, the local pushback against the construction of data centers is hitting Independence, Missouri's 5th most populous city. The city council earlier this year approved a large data center and gave 90% tax abatement to the tech company planning to build it. Voters already ousted 2 of the councilors who approved the deal in April, but not every council member was on the ballot. So opponents of the data center also launched a recall petition against Councilor John Perkins. McKenna Cobb, a resident behind the recall effort, called the effort, quote, the opportunity to have a vessel for that frustration and to organize and demand better. Organizers collected enough signatures to force this recall vote, though supporters of Perkins are still suing to knock it off the ballot. So
interesting.
But that's supposed to, assuming the lawsuit doesn't succeed, that will take place. The recall will take place on September 1st. So if it's like recalls, first of all, they have to vote. It seems like the first step is to vote on whether or not they want to recall. And then if they do, then there will be an election to fill the position. But data centers, folks, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And it's not nothing. Like, I think a lot of Democrats in Wisconsin want to poo-poo it as like, oh, it's just one issue among many. I don't think it is. I think it's huge. But we'll see. We'll see. It's enough to get a recall. It's enough to get enough signatures for a recall in Independence and to have knocked out already two counselors. And here in our local area, there's a county commissioner fighting for her political life because she signed one of those non-disclosure agreements with one of these companies to build a data center. So they're having real impacts in local elections, these data centers. And as more and more people are learning about it, it's climbing the electoral level, the ladder, as it will. But so that's coming up next week.
Do you know what tomorrow is, Sam?
Well, various things.
It's the start of the Minnesota State Get-Together, the state fair.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we need to, are we going to end soon? We need to talk about, first of all, your favorite thing to do at the state fair. This is a big effing deal in the state of Minnesota, the state fair. And we should talk about the new foods that are being offered at some point, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, everyone wants to know about the Minnesota State Fair.
I think
well,
so.
It's funny because the Minnesota State Fair pops up in politics every now and again. One of the things that Peggy Flanagan kept hitting Angie Craig on was Angie Craig didn't attend the first day. Like, it's traditional for statewide politicians to attend the state fair on its opening day. And Angie Craig was not a statewide candidate. She was not a statewide public official, and I don't think she planned on running for the Senate at the time of the state fair last year. But not only did she not attend the first day, which is fine, she was a congresswoman and not from that district where the state fair takes place, which is in the state fair is in Betty McCollum's district in St. Paul, Minnesota. But anyways, so The problem was where Angie Craig actually was on the first day of the state fair last year, which was in Jackson, Wyoming, Jackson Hole, at a crypto conference where she was in the group of speakers that introduced Eric Trump to the stage. So
I remember that. Yes,
so the state fair can have political ramifications.
It's
also,
very political. All the candidates are there. People go to the fair sometimes exclusively to meet the candidates or our sitting elected officials. I know our U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar is there bright and early, probably before 6 a.m. before the gates open to greet everybody who's waiting to get into the state fair. So, and she has her own booth at the state fair, but the parties have their booths. Candidates show up. It's fun. It's fun. And my favorite thing, besides the crop art, which people make art out of
seeds.
Hundreds of different seeds. It's very cool. I like the fine arts building. I love the dairy barn, and the butter sculptures are great. I don't know. If you've never been to the state fair and you're close to Minnesota, you need to stop by.
Yeah, it's gigantic. Well, there are different, radio stations and news organizations and podcast people, not us, but that have that have booths there and do shows from there. And there are some sports related content stuff that I like to interact with when I'm at the fair, because I'm a hopeless fan of Minnesota sports teams. I just keep beating myself up year after year rooting for Minnesota sports teams. Although, I have been following the Minnesota Lynx this year, and they're just absolutely killing it. So women's sports teams can do quite well in Minnesota. It's the men that seem to be having the problem. But yeah, no, I agree with you. The seed art is incredible. I mean, it's just amazing. If you don't know what seed art is, you have to experience it to believe it. But it's like thousands of tiny little seeds like different colored seeds glued onto a surface to create essentially a painting, but with seeds instead of
just
paint.
Just search it up. I'm sure you can see lots of pictures online. And Sam can probably link to something about that.
If I remember to. But also craft, there's always a craft brewing exhibit thing where you can try like hundreds of different samples from all over the state of Minnesota, and that's always fun. And then this wide array of food, even for a guy with my more restrictive diet, there's options and things to find there and sample and try. But it is a lot of people. It's a lot.
Okay.
And if there's one food thing you got to do, it's that corn on the cob.
Dip it in butter. It's amazing. But the Minnesota Farmers Union coffee shop always has great stuff. And this year they have a banana butterscotch barn raiser with caramelized croutons. And wow, it looks like a vanilla pound cake layered with roasted bananas, butterscotch sauce, and whipped cream, garnished with a nut-free cereal mix that involves Corn Chex, cookie butter, and chocolate chips. Hey, it's vegetarian, but not vegan. Sorry, Sam, but it looks delish.
Yeah, they didn't add a slice of meat on top of that.
With that, and then you can get a sweet peach lemonade sparkler if you're thirsty. Caramel apple iced tea, strawberries and blueberry creme parfait. Man, there's some good stuff. And of course the cheese curds, because I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin. You got to get the cheese curds. People in Minnesota, I think they like the mini donuts, or the funnel cake.
And then there's this.
And then the Martha's cookies. You got to get a big bucket of Martha's cookies.
I was going to mention. So there's these cookie sailors. They only sell cookies at the Minnesota State Fair. That's it. That's the only place they sell cookies, and they make millions of dollars every year during those
for a
couple of
week
weeks
of the fair. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just incredible, like the amount of business one booth can do. So people are on these waiting lists that are years and years and years long of food vendors to try and get into the Minnesota State Fair. It's a huge deal if you break through and actually get into the fair, because so many people go. Jen, it's just insane, the turnout at this thing. So
go to the Minnesota State Fair, the great get together, and I think you'll have a good time.
Okay. Very good. Well, tomorrow, aside from the start of the state fair, the American Dissent has an awesome interview. We'll be talking with someone who runs a actual news organization, and very exciting stuff. Obviously, it's independent. This is not, Salzburger or something like that. This is someone who takes the craft of journalism very seriously and has to survive in this climate where more and more journalism is getting consolidated into fewer and fewer hands. So I'm really excited about kind of learning about that and talking about what it's like to be a journalist in today's environment and what changes have happened over just the last few years, never mind the last 20 or 30 years. But so I'm really excited to have that conversation. Come back tomorrow to see it. But for now, on behalf of Jen Schultz, I'm Sam Martin, and this has been Our Dissent.